And so welcome everyone. This is our speaker series hosted by Institute Flay. And luckily, I know everyone on the call right now. So welcome. So who are we? You know me, Emily Cerebrani, and my co-founder, Natalie. She doesn't feel well today, and she's going to join us the next time. So we are the Female Leadership Evolution Institute, and we're a women-led community-based educational platform that translates the latest scientific research on female health and leadership into practical strategies. We focus on understanding the female stress cycle, and from biological, psychological, and physiological perspectives, empowering women to optimize their performance and thrive without burning out. And so how this hour is going to work, this is a little bit different format. It's a workshop format. And however, we would love to welcome your questions. So the chat is open. Please log in or raise your digital hand. And we will also have 10 minutes before the end for all of the questions. With that, let me introduce Christine. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Christine last year in one of the somatic courses. Christine is a leadership and organizational psychologist, certified somatic coach, and corporate trainer. And with over 20 years of experience in leadership and team development, Christine helps employees to be the best they can be at work. And she holds a PhD in leadership psychology and created the first body-based leadership assessment. Welcome, Christine. We're so happy and so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Emily. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And by the way, I'm dialing in from Colorado, just north of Denver, in case anyone's wondering. So,
sorry, yeah, I had to react. It's my love state.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
All right. Okay, so Christine, please go ahead and with your presentation, and we will. I know that you're also sharing some slides, so just let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to give everyone just a brief overview of what is leadership embodiment and why is it important? Why should we be talking about it right now? Some examples. And then I'd love to share my research, my doctoral research on leadership embodiment, because it's exciting to see what's happening in this field. And then I would love to take people through a couple of short exercises around embodiment practice, because that's really kind of where it's at, right? Is doing this in our lives and making it part of our practice and our leadership practice, so that we can become more effective leaders. And so that's what I would love to do today. And I'm like I said, I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'd love it if you could just share a couple of my slides, Emily, and I can talk people through it.
Absolutely.
I started out with this definition of what leadership embodiment is, because when I say it, people often kind of get this funny look on their face and, look at me with like 5 heads, like, what is leadership embodiment? And so I put it on paper here. I know some people like to read, but it really is being able to take into account your full body, your full self, not just from, the neck up, but being able to access what your body is telling you and making meaning of that so that you have better self-awareness and can respond better in the moment, especially under moments of stress. And so I'll give an example. Years ago, I was setting up a 5-day training program, and the day before it started, I was told I had to change rooms. So you can imagine, I had done so much setup and planning and preparation for the room that I had been given. And then to be told last minute I had to change rooms sent these waves of panic. And I felt vertigo, and I could just feel this wave of just emotion and anxiety just take over my full body, and responded to the person who told me I had to change rooms in not a great way. So I probably could have said something different. And so looking back, as they say, hindsight is 20/20. I probably could have said something a little bit better, something more professional, more in alignment with my values and how I want to show up in the workplace. So it was really about just understanding what was going on in your body and knowing how to better respond in that moment. So that's kind of what we're talking about here with this leadership embodiment. So if you could switch to the next slide, Emily. So I decided to do some research on this topic because there wasn't a whole lot known. And you can think of embodiment as kind of improving your understanding through direct engagement in bodily experiencing and understanding yourself better by tapping into what your body's telling you in a way that can help you build greater self-awareness and confidence and feeling grounded and being able to respond better in those moments when you're under stress, which happens so much at work, especially when you think of the history of the workplace. There are people who still have fear of our history of command and control leadership cultures in cultures of oppression. And so this is something that comes up for a lot of people at work, and depending upon their history and their past with leadership and authority and how they have experienced that in their past. So the question in my mind became, okay, what is leadership embodiment? I had found some specialists who were teaching this, and I thought, what is this? And can you measure it? So we use assessments at work to help us understand ourselves better, self-assessment. So I thought I'd like to look into seeing if we could create a leadership embodiment assessment. So that's what I did. And if you go to the next slide, Emily, it tells you just a little bit more about kind of the background here. Assessments are used quite a bit at work, and there was no other leadership embodiment assessment out there, and very little research. Industry reports and research kept telling us we need, better leaders, more humanistic leaders, and yet the body seemed like it was really missing from much of the leadership development practices and research. And there's a lot of science that backs this up. Other fields were using it, like education and healthcare, but not so much in the workplace. So there seemed like there was a great opportunity for someone to be able to say, okay, let's try to create a leadership assessment tool that can help people understand if they truly are embodying, that leadership embodiment and living into that. And how would they really know? How would they even know if they were doing it? So if you go to the next slide, it's the results of my research. So I ended up with 9 questions, a 9-question self-assessment that someone could use to help them understand themselves a little bit better. And if they really are tapping into their body's intelligence and using that body awareness to help themselves make meaning in terms of being a more effective leader. 9 questions here gave some early positive statistical results around really answering that question. And you can see some of them there. You could even just ask yourself, do I trust my bodily sensations as a source of information in my role as a leader? Am I even doing that? And do you strive to put your full self, your mind and body, into your development as a leader? Are we taking advantage of those types of practices? Questions like, I understand how my behavior affects my health, or during stressful moments, can I identify whether I'm experiencing a fight, flight, or freeze response? So just really getting to know yourself through your body and using this assessment as a tool to help you to do that. So that was the idea behind the research. And like I said, this showed some early positive statistical results for these questions as a self-assessment, a leadership assessment. It does need more testing, and it's something that I'm hoping to continue to work on, but I was happy with some of these results here. And so, Emily, I know you and I had been talking about somatics. We met during our somatic coaching program, and you had asked me, well, how does somatics fit in? What is somatics? And how's that related to leadership embodiment, right? And I thought it was just such a great question, because somatics is that field that focuses on our body and in its sensations, right? So it's a nice weaving together of biology and psychology so that we can really understand ourselves better and try to improve our overall well-being by understanding our our body and trying to use different methods to help ourselves, right? Our overall well-being. So that's what's so exciting about somatics, and that's been around for a long time, the field of somatics in psychology. And so leadership embodiment, I think, is a more recent development. But it's something also that we didn't grow up learning about, right? I mean, no one taught us about somatics and taught us what embodiment means and how it can help us in our day-to-day life. And it turns out there's a whole language around how to talk about it, how to describe it, how to use it for our advantage. And these are things that we really just didn't learn a lot of. And this is the other opportunity I felt was really exciting, is that we have an opportunity to learn more about this so that we can be better at making sure we are showing up as our best selves. And some of these methods have been around for many years. Cultures across the world have been doing this thing already. So in a sense, the research is just kind of catching up to what I think people have been doing for many years. And there are practices such as meditation, yoga, even dance, forms of dance, where cultures have really been tapping into their body and making sure that their body's part of how they're having their life experiences, whether it's, feeling it or releasing things and engaging their body in their emotions and their thoughts and even their problems and getting it out of your system, because that's at the end of the day, the goal is to try to move the issues that we're having out of our body so that we can process it better and move forward and have more successful experiences. And if there was one activity that people could do, for people who are newer to this, and this was, part of what I learned too, that people could do to be more body-based and to be more intentional about accessing what your body's telling you is, one is a grounding exercise. It's just being grounded and centered and confident and knowing where your home base is. And what I would call, in biological terms, I would call your homeostasis, and knowing what that is for you. And so that you know how to come back to that when you are in these moments of stress. So that's the one exercise I thought we could just try together, if that's okay with everybody, is just, give it a whirl in terms of what it means to get grounded and more present.
It's a beautiful practice, and I know that growing up in the Western society, the focus is basically on how do we think, how do we process information. It's all about in our heads, and rarely it's referred to our bodies. And so even though it seems to be so natural, we are one, our body and our head, but there's so much focus where we did not learn this in a natural way. And so bringing this back is such an interesting practice. And I just want to pause for a second and see if you have any questions before we move into the exercises. No questions? Okay. Christine, and I have a question. If we can talk for a second about nervous system regulation, because somatic is directly connected to nervous system regulation, and if we can please speak about this.
Yes, absolutely. So much of this is biology, right? And our nervous system is a system that extends throughout our body and is what regulates us and keeps us in these calm states or these nervous states. And knowing more about your body and how to regulate this is one of the ways that you can become more centered, more grounded, and really just understanding more about your biology so that in these moments of stress, you can do something very intentional to calm yourself down. For example, breathing. Breathing is well known to calm yourself down, and really engaging with your nervous system and using that as a tool in your leadership toolkit to actually calm yourself down in the moment. So it's absolutely tied to that, Emily. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And can you think of the time when your body was communicating with you and your mind was just, no, that's not, I'm not going to accept this signal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember once a time when I was going through a hard time and just really feeling a lot of angst over this issue that I was involved in, and just going over it again and again in my head and just getting very emotional and upset about it. And all of a sudden, I got a cramp in my side. And I knew right away that that was a direct cause of what I was going through, what I was putting myself through. And it really kind of drove it home for me that our minds and our bodies are so connected, and what we think about can influence how our body's feeling, and vice versa. It really is a two-way street, and how they're both so connected. So that was a clear way. I mean, at the time, I know we have health issues, and sometimes we can have like indigestion, or we can have back pain. I get back pain now as I'm getting older. And that's one thing, but I think it's also about distinguishing the difference between some of that regular, body aches that we might be having versus how we might even be causing our body pain or discomfort based on just what we're going through in our heads, the story we're telling ourselves in our head.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when my day filled with too many activities, or I take too many responsibilities, my shoulders start hurting. And I know that I'm carrying too much weight. So
Yes.
my body, in a very direct way, communicates. And but before that, I actually did not know. I thought that, okay, that's just what it is. I was not connecting the body signals to the actual work and to the actual processing in my own, my own emotions.
Yeah, I love that. And especially since we carry so much tension in our shoulders, in our upper body. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love that.
Can you guys think of any examples, Olga?
Sorry, I raised my hands before you said examples. I guess I came up with a question of if is that okay? Shall we? Yeah. Christine, it just dawned on me. I was impressed or even surprised when you said that apparently there's not that much study of leadership embodiment. I was surprised because I got introduced to it more than 10 years ago, Wendy Palmer's books and so on, and I thought it would have progressed over the 10 years that I've just been following her here and there. But I was very surprised that, as you're saying, there wasn't that much research, and I'm just curious because you've obviously dived into it. What's your take on it? Why do you think it wasn't picked up earlier, even though Wendy's books were already out there and there was quite a big following and workshops and so on, but I was actually surprised that it wasn't taken further.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up Wendy. So I first learned about leadership embodiment from Wendy Palmer, and sadly she has passed away. And I was just so honored that she was part of my research. I had started it in 2016 and was able to interview her and talk to her about what it means to be embodied and be an embodied leader, because that was part of my research, which was trying to really hone it in to define it so that we could measure it, right? And so during that time, I was able to find out that although there are people out there practicing this and teaching it, people like Wendy Palmer and others, and that a lot of people are doing it and practicing it and just kind of having this knowing sense that this is really helpful. Again, based on many of the world traditions that are, happening, and whether it's through music or yoga, or Wendy used Aikido, martial arts, a lot in her practice, that although it was benefiting people and does really help people, the research part of it, the organizational research, really wasn't keeping up with the practice. So that's what it is. I think that when it comes to organizational leadership, that particular research space, there isn't as much research there. But in healthcare, yes, there's growing research in healthcare. It's exciting to see people using things like Tai Chi and meditation to help with illness. But in organizational development, in that type of research, there wasn't as much. And it's starting to grow. I'm trying to follow it and as best I can, and it's growing, and it's really exciting to see that. So yeah, I know. I think that for me, I wasn't totally surprised to find out that there wasn't a lot of research, because it's something that was a little bit newer to organizations. And not every company is open to, trying these types of new practices. They tend to be more focused on the bottom line, which is, natural and normal. It's where they need to be focused. So, yeah, so it was really interesting for me to see some companies even kind of having more of a readiness for this type of practice and others not so much. So I would say that it's not as mainstream as some of the other practices that are out there, things like emotional intelligence and mindfulness that we really have seen grow, over the years. The body-based practices are looking at it from that point of view is a little bit newer to companies. Does that help answer your question?
It does. I guess because I'm struggling the same. I'm such a firm believer in this, but when I work with leaders and especially with the organizations to whom you want to offer coaching, you can't talk about it because that's not a selling point. Whereas when you work with leaders privately, once they get it, they think it's like, why wasn't I told about it before? But they still wouldn't go and talk at the organization. So there's almost like a stigma of a softie or whatever it is that a company is working with your body. It's not the real leader. And I'm wondering still, when are we going to get to the time when this is going to be accepted? But I like what you said about EQ. It wasn't there on the agenda 10 years ago. It has become acute. So let's hope.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I feel like in the whole evolution of leadership development that the body-based practices will become more, on the forefront of how we look at leadership. And I feel like there are practitioners out there who are using it, and I do try to follow them, and I do hear about examples where they are working with companies. So little by little, it's becoming more mainstream. But I totally get what you're saying, that how some companies just aren't really connecting the dots just yet. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
That's such a beautiful segue. Hi, Madison. Thank you for joining us. And we did talk about, prior to our meeting, we talked about how do we bring this to the organizations. And I'm just also wondering if this geographically specific, maybe in some other parts of the world, it's more acceptable, and in some other parts of the world, it's still such a huge gap. So that's just something that also kind of interesting to know if there is in some countries, this conversation is more acceptable and they're open to these practices, and some other countries are a little bit more behind.
Yes, I would agree. Yes, that is the case.
Yeah. All right. I also want to ask you how the leadership embodiment can help you with managing stress.
Yeah. So it's such a great question, because to me, being embodied as a leader is incorporating your body into how you problem solve and make decisions and make choices about how you're going to respond in moments of stress, right? Because we experience so much of that. And so to me, the embodiment practices or somatics are the tools, they are the ways in which we can understand our body more and become more self-aware, so that in these moments we know if we are having a fight or a flight kind of response. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, really paying attention to the emotions that are felt throughout our body. And the example I had given earlier about myself and just kind of feeling this wave of vertigo kind of overtake my body, and knowing how we react under stress. So paying more attention to our body so that we know, okay, I'm triggered. There's something going on here. I need to really watch out for how I respond. If I want to make sure I'm responding in the way that is appropriate in this moment. And it's not to say that you can't take off and run if you're experiencing fear. Do that if that is what works for you, but just use it to help you become more body aware, I think is how I would answer that.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it can be a really great tool with decision making.
Absolutely. Yes. Making those choices that could make or break a situation you're in, and making sure you're doing it in a way that is going to be the best outcome for the situation you're in. Yeah, absolutely. And I was working with someone who was telling me that he got into an explosive argument with his peer and almost gave himself what his doctor called an emotional heart attack. And now he wears an iWatch and monitors certain vitals throughout his workday, and just to ensure that he's, learning about his body's response and knowing not to get so explosively angry in the moment again. And understanding that. So it is so related to our health. Absolutely, it's related to our health. But getting back to Olga's point earlier about how not every company is really thinking about it this way, I've heard some places say, well, that's for healthcare to take care of. That's for your benefits department. We don't do that in leadership, for example. But it's all related. It's very much connected, and it's just hasn't been part of the conversation as much. Yeah.
I wonder if embodied leadership can be presented as a superpower.
Yeah, I love that. I think absolutely, when we think about competencies and skills and strengths that we all have as leaders, this is absolutely, to me, a new superpower. Kind of like I was saying before, we see different trends in the field of leadership and leadership development. And to me, being more body-based and using somatic practices is another type of skill. It's another area where we can really focus on and think of as a new superpower. Absolutely. I love that.
Exactly. And I know that it just actually emotional intelligence is a part of our vocabulary, but it hasn't been a part of our vocabulary for that long.
Yeah.
And what about body intelligence?
Exactly.
Introducing a body intelligence as a part of our vocabulary as well.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I learned in my research, is that as you're doing things like a body scan or tuning into your body, you learn that there are ways of describing what you're feeling in your body. Things like the temperature of what you're feeling or the texture of what you're feeling, and ways of describing it that, like you said, are just not in our vocabulary. Like, we didn't learn how to do this. And it's a whole new thing to learn about and to be able to use as we are trying to improve the way we operate, right? Yeah, absolutely. There's a language to it.
And I think it's a beautiful segue to the practice that you want to introduce this morning or this evening for some people, and to use some of this body language and body intelligence.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, let's do a short grounding exercise because, like I said, this is the one that I think is very foundational to leadership embodiment and somatics. And that is finding your home base, your homeostasis, by knowing how to be grounded and centered and feeling that safe space that we all want to know. We all want to know what that feels like so we can know when we're off, when we're thrown off, when we're triggered, and recognize that change in our body. So let's do this real quick. We'll do kind of a simple version of it, but so I would ask everybody to get grounded, to just kind of get comfortable. You can stand up if you want to do this, or you can sit down and really just, first of all, think of relaxing your body, kind of shake it out a little bit, relax yourself. Try to sit up straight, stand up straight, and make sure you have good posture and that your diaphragm is open and that you are sitting in an open stance and able to breathe in easily, and get really comfortable, especially with how your feet are standing on the ground. So that's a big part of it. Is what I learned from Wendy Palmer in terms of getting grounded is tuning into the universe and the environment around us and imagining the energy of the universe kind of flowing from the earth through our feet, up through our body, through our head, and releasing, and tapping into the universe's energy as a way of helping us to get more centered and more grounded, and feeling what it feels like to feel your feet firmly on the ground and to feel the earth and to feel that steadiness and that groundedness in your feet even. And then kind of working up, through your body, taking a deep breath and being able to have a deep breath and to breathe deeply, not those shallow breaths that we're all so used to doing day to day, but really just take some deep breaths and relax yourself, calm yourself, tune into what it really feels like to feel confident, to feel safe, to notice what's going on in your body. And sometimes it helps to be in an environment where you can look at something that feels safe and comfortable. So ideally, you can do this in a place that is safe for you. Maybe it's your home, maybe you have some space outside. I like to try to get out into nature and to be surrounded by nature because it feels very safe and human to me, and helping me to kind of get into that headspace of getting away from our day-to-day worries and to stop thinking about the job and the workplace and the pressures we have, to just get ourselves away from that. But if you can't do that, and you only have, let's say, a conference room, it's totally good to just, if you can, grab a conference room throughout your day and take a few pauses to make sure that you are pausing to kind of recenter yourself. We all get so busy. We run from meeting to meeting, call to call, and to make sure you're pausing throughout your day to get back to that grounded sense of feeling calm and reassured and safe, and so that you can notice better if you are being thrown off. Maybe you just came out of a meeting and you need to take a few minutes to just reset and get back to that kind of home base. And so that's one exercise that people can do that is directly tied to being more embodied. Another one is to do a body scan. And this is a practice that I've noticed is becoming more commonplace, especially for people who do use meditation in their practice. This is often tied to that. But a body scan is something where you can just kind of, starting from one end of your body to the other, ask yourself what your sensations are. So if you kind of start, at the top with your head and you kind of move down, ask yourself, what am I feeling? What's my head feeling? What am I feeling in my face? Am I feeling tension? Am I feeling temperature? Is it cool? Is it hot? If I could assign a picture to it, what would that picture be? And it's all to help you make more meaning of what you're experiencing in the moment. And again, I know that it's easy to fall into our usual reasoning, like you might have a headache, or you might have allergies that might be making you feel like you're stuffy in your head. It's being able to notice the difference between your usual kinds of, physical sensations and what might be new and different based on what's going on in that situation that you're experiencing at work. And then moving down to your neck area and asking yourself, okay, let's focus in on this area of my body. What am I feeling right now? Am I feeling any tension? Many of you might be aware of the chakra energy patterns throughout our body, and our neck and our this part of our body is one of those areas that you can think about, well, what am I feeling? Am I feeling tension or tightness, or what exactly is going on here? Could that be tied to my inability to voice what is important to me and what's going on at work? And then if you move down even further to your torso area, our chest is an area where we can hold a lot of tension and constraint. And when we talk about somatics and embodiment, that is one of the questions you want to ask yourself. Am I feeling constrained and tight? I know I tend to do this when I get stressed out. I tend to kind of tighten up and kind of cower and do this and close up. Are you doing that? And then if you move down to your stomach area, are you feeling any particular sensations that are a little bit different than the usual? We like to think of butterflies in our stomach or swirlies in our stomach. Are there other ways that you might be able to describe what you're feeling in your stomach area? Some people call this intuition, right? Is our gut sense. That's another way of looking at this. But how else could you describe what's going on in that part of your body? And then, of course, we think of the pelvic area. And this is an area that many traditions call our source of power and strength. And as women, we know this. This is where we give birth and the home of our reproductive organs. And what else can we be tuning into with this part of our body? This is, as we're standing up and getting grounded, this is very much what many call our center, the center of our being. So tapping into that part of our body a bit more. And then as you continue to go down and think about your legs, our legs are what hold us up. They are the pillars that hold us and help us be grounded. If you are able to use your legs, I know not everybody is able to, but asking yourself, what are you feeling in your legs? And how is that a source of strength for you? And what are the sensations you're feeling telling you about yourself? And then continuing on to the rest of your body, your feet. Are your feet able to be grounded and support you and feel like you're holding steady in your position? For example, if you're giving a presentation at work, finding that stance, that place that is confident for you to be able to present and speak and sound confident and reassured, and finding that stance that works for you in maybe a high stakes meeting that you're having, where you're presenting out something that might be hard to talk about, right? That we all have to do at work. And are you able to stay grounded in that moment and feel like you can get back to that home base where you can feel confident to answer the hard questions that come at you in those situations? So that's a body scan, and wanted to share that as just another way that we can actually tune into our body more. That many of us, like you were saying, we didn't grow up learning this. We didn't grow up pausing and asking ourselves, what are we feeling in our feet, in our legs, in our hips? And it's really in service of being more self-aware, having greater self-awareness and body-based awareness even, so that we can better understand ourselves and know how to get back to a better place and within ourselves. So yeah, and again, I like to get out in nature. You can do kind of a walking type of grounding exercise if that's what works for you, or some people might just step out of the office and walk around the parking lot for a couple of minutes. If you're able to do that, that can be helpful to kind of bring yourself back down to a homeostasis. But those are really the two basic practices that everybody can use anywhere. You can use it at home, you can use it at work. And again, it's about helping you to make better choices, make better decisions, especially when you're in these moments of high stress, to your point, which happens to us so much at work. And especially now in the environment we're in. I think we're all being triggered even more right now with things that are happening in society and at work. And we're having to really make sure that we can navigate ourselves, right, even better than we have in the past because of the challenges we're all facing right now. So I'll pause there and see how that was for everybody. What was that like for you? How was it for you? And any questions about it?
That was such a beautiful practice, Christine. And I see Jana we have a question.
You know, listening to this I realize how I was in the management role for 14 years, how it was basically just being so tense, holding everything in for the whole shift. It was like, it's brutal. It's complete opposite of what this is. And it's like so stiff. And I started working on myself as I'm washing dishes in front. And I would just glance at myself, and I realized how tense I am, like how my face is tense, so it's been such a long process of actually bringing in the attention to my own body and how I feel. And so I'm still working on it. And I really appreciate you bringing in the meditation part and then the body scan, like how those two things, like even just 5 minutes a day, I can see how that would help me a lot to make more progress there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you so much, Jana. I experience it too, still, tension at work, and I'm getting better at noticing it. And I'm not at all saying it's easy to work through this, not at all. And it's different for everybody. And I'm still working on it. And I appreciate you sharing your experience with it. And I'm glad that this is bringing more attention to it for you.
And I think it's so important when we can name our emotions and not just going into the story, this happened because but really that's how I feel. And once we know how we feel, also check, where does it show up? in my body.
Yeah.
You know, I feel sad, I feel tired, or I feel that I carry a world on my shoulders.
Yes.
Like coming to the emotion as opposed to the storytelling why this happened.
Yes, I love that. That's so important because we can get so caught up in the story we tell ourselves about what's happening, but when we stop to ask ourselves what our body's telling us and use that as another source of data, you could find out that there's more to it. And maybe, kind of to your point, Emily, we've been convincing ourselves that it's something, you know, in our heads, we've been telling ourselves this story that, oh, that's what it is. But it could be something else. It could be more to it. And we could be cutting ourselves short by not accessing our bodily intelligence.
And so interesting, just one step further is once you identify what is really, which body part, asking what is the message of it.
Yeah, exactly. And interpreting that. And it's a lot. It's different. It's new for a lot of people. And we're not used to doing that. And sometimes we need help. We can't do it on our own. We need to talk to others to help us. So yeah, so true.
It's a learned skill, even though it should have been coming naturally to us, but it's actually a learned skill.
Yes, totally.
And I think I like what you're saying, Emily. It's a learned skill because the big insight for me this time was, here we are, Olga. So it's like you knew this is working. You knew you practiced it all the time. You know you are assigning it to your clients, to those who are ready. But what I realized right now, it's been a while since I've done a body scan. And I was sitting there and thinking, well, this is like a cobbler without shoes. It's the discipline that kind of comes and goes away. And yeah, and I am now in the down thing, kind of having forgotten some of not doing my practices regularly. And it reminded me, it's just so simple. And if you do it regularly, it's such a good way to get in touch with your body. But hey, I have probably 10 years history with this, and I can't say it's easy. It just goes off and on, and I'm on a very off sort of trajectory at the moment. Yeah, it's hard.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree, Olga. Yeah, it's requires regular practice, right, to make it part of our daily life and our language, and to see some progress and to be very intentional about it. We get so caught up in our lives, it's very easy to let it fall off our plates and not pay attention to it. I agree.
It seems so easy, but in fact, we don't
Good
have.
question.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to ask a question?
I'm curious about the reactivity part. In that moment where the reactive response takes place, would it make sense that it is caused because of that disconnect with the body is so much where there is just no connection to it? Is that has to do with that?
Yeah. And I'd be curious to know your thoughts about this, Emily, too, but I would say absolutely. Everyone reacts differently. And if you're not aware of how you're experiencing it in that moment and having that self-awareness and not knowing regulation tools to use to apply to yourself in that moment, then sure, we can be very reactive and be living in this kind of continuous state of just reacting to people in various situations in ways that are really not ideal, right? That are not helping us. But these are things that we have just formed over time. It's how we've been conditioned and habits we have. And so it is very much about that reactivity and knowing how we typically react to things so that you can choose to make a change in how you do react.
I would say that our body acts as a buffer, and so it will listen, because if it just goes to our mind, we come back with the immediate reaction, which might not be the best reaction, right? But sometimes if you notice that in our body, it shows something. Like, for example, for me, it shows that when I'm sending an email and this is not the right content or something, it shows me in my body that something is not right, like something is not in alignment. And the same with the responses. When there is something is not in alignment, if you start noticing, your body will be showing you, oh, there is something uncomfortable, somehow, either in my voice or in my chest or some other parts of the body, and not comfortable. And that's actually a signal. But you really need to see, you need to notice this and see the pattern to be able to understand the signals of your body, the language of your body.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but this is such a good question. And you have to be so intentional because, again, it seems to be our body is our body, but we did not grow up reading or understanding our bodies. So it needs to be like we need to relearn the language.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Was that helpful, Yana?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's any other questions? I know that we're a very small group today, and Olga had to log off. She told me previously that she's running to something else. So I'm just curious, anything else that comes to mind that we want to discuss?
So, Emily, I know that your company platform, this wonderful place to explore women's leadership, is focused on women. And I love that and I appreciate that. And I wanted to also share that the research I did was not specific to women or gender, and not to find out anything about women in particular that might be different from women and men and how they lead. But what I did discover is that many of the thought leaders in leadership embodiment are women. And I thought, wow, that's just so telling right there. And I think it really says a lot about how women are naturally more tuned into their body and have perhaps even more ability, to tune into their body or are paying attention to it. And I don't have any research to back this up, and it's also not to say that women leaders are better than men, although there has been some research showing that women, certain strengths that women have are more effective in the workplace. But I thought it was really interesting that some of the people who really are the true thought leaders in leadership embodiment are women. People like Wendy Palmer, who was doing this back in the 70s, and Ginny Whitelaw, who was also part of my research, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who has done a lot of this type of work for a long time, even, before we started calling this leadership embodiment. And then some of the newer thought leaders now who have many books published on this and who are, really trying to spread the message and advocate for this work. Many of them are women too. So I thought that was really interesting, and I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much. And it makes so much sense because as women, we are more in tune with our bodies, and because behind all of this is our hormonal makeup. And when we are more, more embracing and building bridges with as opposed to fighting, it's actually also can be explained from the biological standpoint because, and hormonal standpoint, because we have oxytocin in much higher quality. So we're used to building this and embracing other people and building bridges with other people, as opposed to just fighting and fighting and doing other things. We're tending and befriending.
Yes.
So it makes so much more sense that we would embrace what is happening in our bodies, how do we read our bodies, and share this with other people, which makes sense that these people are researchers sharing their knowledge with everybody else. And that's such a beautiful thing. And this is such a beautiful circle because at Feminine Leadership Institute, that's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing knowledge from the hormonal perspective, from the body perspective, and psychological perspective to tie this all in one concept. And so this is just like it's a perfect circle.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Emily. This has just been so fascinating to talk about this. And I really appreciate you giving me some space here to share the research I did.
Thank you so much, Christine. And we're really grateful for your presence and for your research. And